It's Friday night, and we are the Asea 5, or tonight, the Asea 4, the Fab 4. And we have a very special program, but just for those of you who are just tuning in and you don't know us, we're here every Friday night. I'm Dr. Maureen Hayes from Galveston, Texas, and I'm joined by Jim and Ann Glenn from San Antonio, Texas. Jim is our big money man, our ex-stockbroker, and Ann is our beautiful nutritionist and personal trainer. And of course, you guys know our exquisite dentist from the state of Washington, Dr. Lee Ostler, who is the author of Redox Matters, Connecting the Dots Between Redox Biology and Health, and now the author of Healthy Matters, Applying the Redox Lifestyle. So we go from connecting the dots to stepping stones to applying it to your own health. So this is fantastic. He's going to talk all about this book and why you want to get it. I imagine that most of you already have. If you don't have this book in your arsenal, please, by all means, order it tonight. You can get it on redoxmatters.com, or you can go to Amazon and get it. This is a shield for everybody who doesn't understand redox biochemistry or biology. You could just hand them this book, lend it to them. And if you get it at convention, you could even get it signed by Dr. Lee. So pretty amazing. My book right here. It says, Always Your Inner Doctor, Healthy Matters from Lee Ostler. So absolutely fantastic. And I'm very, very proud because I'm Dr. Lee's sponsor. So it's very, very special to me. So anyway, Dr. Lee, come on and kind of take us back to the beginning. What made you write the first book, which was amazing and really helps to describe redox? And if you will, take a second to talk, maybe for those who aren't familiar with redox biochemistry, just give kind of a synopsis of what it is, and then take us into the new book about how we can apply it, because that's really where the crux of the matter is not just understanding the science, but being able to apply it to your everyday life and what the benefits of that are. So thank you.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be grilled on the panel. It's to have the roles reversed, and so it's my honor to take a moment, I guess, in the spotlight and share some of my thoughts and feelings about this journey. My journey began in redox a few years ago when my wife's physician recommended that we move her into some redox signaling molecules to help her. She was having some significant health challenges, and so I asked him what it was, and he said, just go get some. He wasn't involved at the time, and he said, I hear it works. So I was kind of on my own, and that's actually how I met Dr. Hayes. Was I had seen some of her materials online, and so I just thought, well, she seems credible. I contacted her, and we chatted and developed a little bit of a relationship long distance about redox. And I remember asking her, I said, if this is real, if this is what you're all telling me it is, and I decide to get in this, because I don't know that I am, but if I decide to do this, would you be my mentor? And she gladly agreed to do that. Well, the understanding of what redox is, most people that know me know I have kind of an intense brain, and I need to know how things work. And in this case, I needed to know how electrons moved and what was going on at the subcellular level. And so I began researching, and unfortunately, there's not a lot, there's not a plentiful number of redox sources out there. There was a couple of books. There was a good PhD level biochemistry, textbook on redox biochemistry, and yes, I did read every page and marked it up. But as I was doing it, I was kind of keeping notes, and someone came along and said, "Can we have those notes? I mean, you've got a nice bibliography and some summaries there just for it was my own study. That's how I study." And I go, well, okay. And then they came back and said, well, this should be a book. And so that gave me the new thought that maybe I should study more intently. And one thing led to the next, and that's how Redox Matters came out, is because I was searching for answers as well as to what was this crazy thing about redox molecules, and such a new thing, and it really wasn't in mainstream medicine or healthcare yet. But I could see that it was working with people, and I had it in my own life with my wife and even with myself. So I knew there was something to it. And so almost all of my research in this, came from PubMed. I spent, many, many, many hours compiling many citations and literature references straight from the primary sources and stitching those together. And that's really how Redox Matters as a book came to be. I didn't really source a lot of other secondary or even tertiary level information. It all came from that. And I've had many occasions to be, with others who I consider to be the experts who validate, what I've discovered. And so that really felt good. So Redox Matters came about just because I wanted to know the science, at an elemental level as to what does cellular communication look like? What does that mean? And then before I even finished that book, I realized that just knowing the chemistry wasn't going to tell the full story. And it was a dawning realization that somehow we had to move or transition this into what does it mean in real life. And that makes one more of a student of nutrition and, just lifestyle in general. And so that became the tone that the second book, Healthy Matters, took, was applying the redox science into your real average, life. It requires some thinking there. And I've approached this from the standpoint of what does the body need? How does the body work? What are the rules of the cell? And when we start to speak about nutrition, for example, everybody wants to know what the diet is. Tell me the diet. Tell me what I need to eat. What specific ingredients do I get for the food that I'm going to consume and so forth. And my conclusion is that the redox diet is not a named diet. This isn't like if you went out and said, well, let me get the South Beach diet or the Mediterranean diet or the Hollywood this or that diet or whatever, you'll get a list of things to eat and a list of things not to eat and, and so on and so forth. But as I got into them and I realized that not all of them obey or follow the rules of our cells. And that should be concerning to people. The question that we should be asking is before I choose or pick a diet, is I should be asking, well, how does the machine work? And an analogy might be you're driving your car. You put gas in the car and you put oil in the car and the machine works well. But if you put contaminated fuel or you put water in your fuel, or you put sugar in your fuel tank, anything other than, pure gasoline, you're going to foul the engine. It's not going to work properly. And then you've got some major repairs to do. And I think there's an analogy there in the human body. There's certain rules, there's certain ways that the cells are designed to work. And when we go outside of those rules and the cells aren't functioning properly, then we're going to have a problem. And those problems are, the result of dysfunction. And then they produce disease and disorder and so forth. And so getting into the Healthy Matters redox lifestyle mindset is not about trying to dial in a specific diet per se. It's more about starting with, well, how does the cell work? What are the rules for energy metabolism? What are the rules for communication? And if I know those rules, then it can inform my decisions when I do go to the grocery store or when I make a trip to the refrigerator or when I'm, wondering, well, what can I do to, become healthier and so forth. And I think that rests on the idea of you teach the principles, and then people can learn to kind of govern themselves that way. But it has to start with the right information. So Healthy Matters does not pick a favorite diet or a celebrity this or that or the fad whatever diet. It's teaching the principles of how your cells work and the impact that food has upon those cells. Because there's one thing that is intrinsically and solidly connected to our health, and that is what we call energy metabolism. How we burn fuel for energy, and how we talk about the byproducts of that process creating signaling molecules, but we don't talk much about the actual metabolism or combustion of fuels in our cells. And that is inexorably linked with redox functioning and with redox health. So that kind of gets into the idea of, we kind of like look down on the idea of, if we're just a pill popper, if we just take pills and get prescriptions and use medicines to bridge the gap or resolve the difference or do the intervention for whatever reasons. And yet sometimes we're too content to take a supplement, even an Asea supplement. And then we still sit on the couch and watch football or, dramas or TV or whatever, and eat our Cheetos and think that because we're taking a redox supplement that we're healthy. And I'll grant that we're healthier by doing that, but still, this whole concept of lifestyle has to kick in somewhere. And so anyway, that's kind of a slow evolution of thought that I had from redox matters into healthy matters, is because you have to plug it in somewhere and make it apply to your everyday life, which is about food, and it's about your activity level and how your cells function.
Well, I love the new. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just saying how much I love the new book. We got ours just a little sooner than you may have, so that's the only reason I've dented into it, and I'm intrigued by it. I really love it. But you were commenting about Cheetos. I mean, then the redox signaling is going to have to work that much harder, because that's just not something you should have, or at least if you have it, it should be very rare. But I like the chapter talking about metabolic inflexibility, how high a number there are of people with that issue.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, I will. So, the people that, snack every, couple hours, that's the only way they can keep energy. That's part of it. And hangry. And I love that chapter and how all of that, correlates with belly fat. And nutrition is part of the puzzle, and fitness is part of the puzzle. And then you got your redox signaling. And if we're lacking the redox signaling, here we are now able to replenish it. But it really does go all hand in hand. They've got to be able to care about this other part so the redox will work better. You have to have enough water, have to have enough sleep, and then you have to have enough better eating. So I love that chapter and how you talked about it. So maybe you want to elaborate a little more.
Yeah, that's when we speak of nutrition, most people's paradigm or conception of nutrition is the nutrients. It's the vitamins and the cofactors and so forth. But a really important part of nutrition is the energy source. I don't want to get too geek out on this or become too scientific nerdy, but it helps to understand, because when you put wood on a fire and strike a match, there's oxygen available, and we're basically transferring electrons from the wood, which is our fuel, onto the oxygen molecule, which when present makes the fire continue. That's how we combust wood or fuel of any kind. The byproduct of that is smoke and water vapor. And in a fire, we don't see the water vapor because it evaporates. But in our cells, it's the same concept. We have to have an energy substrate. There's a source, there's a fuel source that needs to be burnt or combusted or metabolized, which means that we're extracting the electrons from the glucose and the protein and the fatty acids, and those are transferred to the oxygen molecule. And in doing so, energy is released. That's where the cellular energy comes from, is when we metabolize or take apart these fuel substrates that we call food, and then we can bank or use those fuel or those energy molecules to run our bodies and our hearts and our minds and so forth. And so the byproducts of that process are water, and but there's a problem, because not all of the oxygen winds up being fully reduced, and so we wind up with some some oxidized molecules. Those are reactive, and we call those reactive oxygen species. And the body has learned, nature has learned to design the system such that we use those reactive molecules to do the signaling. That's what conducts the business of the cell. That's what activates these things. And so when we speak of nutrition, yes, it is about nutrients and vitamins and cofactors and so forth, but it's also about the actual food that we eat. And back to your comment on the metabolism side of this, when we only have three types of foods we can eat. It's either a carbohydrate, or it's a fat, or it's a protein. So we have glucose, and we have fatty acids, and we have amino acids. That's the only three things that we can possibly consume as far as an energy source. Well, the rules of the cell basically are such that if there is glucose present in the body or in the bloodstream, meaning we've eaten carbohydrates and I've now got a lot of glucose flowing in my bloodstream, the cells are going to utilize that. And in a generality, the cells are going to burn glucose first if it's available. But what happens when there isn't any glucose? What does the cell do? It can't not burn something, because then it would die. It can't not live without oxygen, and it can't live without a fuel source from some source. But if I'm not feeding it, if I'm not eating it, then what do I do? Well, over time, the body has learned to adapt that situation. Back in the hunter-gatherer, eras of our development, there were times when food wasn't readily available. And so we learned to pack it on and to store it as fat so that in the lean times we could access it. And so the rule of the cell is that when the glucose level drops, because I haven't eaten any carbohydrates, or I'm fasting, for example, or I've exercised, tremendously, and I've burned up the glucose in that activity. If my glucose level drops, the cell will learn to flip or switch or flex over to begin burning fat. And so the ability with which I flex to do that, to access fatty acids as an alternative fuel source, is termed metabolic flexibility. It's about being able to go back and forth between glucose and fatty acids. Carbohydrates and fats are the two fuel sources that I can really store in my body. Protein, not so much. It's there, but and so we don't really utilize protein a lot. The cell will switch from glucose to fatty acids, and that's a process that produces ketones. So when my cells begin metabolizing fatty acids, I'm going to make a substance called ketones. And that's where the basis of ketosis comes from. So when you're eating a keto diet or a keto-friendly diet, you're eating a low carbohydrate diet. We're not making or consuming very much glucose. And so we're burning this fat. That's fat burning, or being fat adapted. Well, where this all comes together is that when the cell metabolically is able to do that, when we've conditioned it to be able to do that, it's a very health-friendly process. When we fast, or when we periodically or intermittently do that, it's a healthy thing. It creates a healthy response. And this was one of the main focuses in Healthy Matters, the book, is the three principles to focus on are ketosis and how we go about inducing that on purpose. The second one is the science principle called hormesis, spelled Hormesis. And the third one is autophagy. And so between those three principles, we get back to your question your comment about metabolic flexibility. When I lower my glucose levels intermittently, I'm creating a state of ketosis, which is a state of nutritional stress. As it turns out, our cells are wired such that when I am in a stressful situation, when I have stress imposed upon me, that creates a mild bit of oxidation in the cell. And this is foundational for everything we do in Asea. This is what makes Asea a redox miracle, is because when a cell is mildly stressed with oxidation, this concept of it adapts or responds to that stress by activating gene pathways that are cell protective. And they create or induce or initiate all of these pathways that renew or regenerate or repair the cell. And so this is like an inverse curve, if you will. It's the Goldilocks principle. You could think of it that way. If I have too much stress, doesn't matter where it comes from, whether it's too much radiation, whether it's too much exercise, whether it's too much toxicity, it doesn't matter. That is going to induce an inflammatory or illness response that will take me towards disease or death eventually. But if I have too little of a stress, truly, if I am in homeostasis, because we talk about that a lot of the cell balance, that we can be in homeostasis. If I stayed in homeostasis all the time, 100% of the time, I wouldn't be a healthy person, because the way we're wired is to experience intermittent, mild amounts of stress that create a little bit of mild oxidation. And when that happens, that's what activates this whole array of pathway genes that we talk about. This is where NRF2 kicks in. This is where the autophagy gene kicks in to begin autophagy. Autophagy, you can think of that as a little Pac-Man that goes through your body, through your cells. I know maybe the younger video game players won't remember Pac-Man, but it's a little gobbly thing that goes around and eats up, everything. And so in our cells, autophagy is when we have this cleanup, this take out the garbage time that typically happens, regularly happens when we sleep. And because we're fasting, our blood glucose is dropping as we sleep through the night. And as it gets down into this more ketosis range, that is a nutritional stress that activates this mild stress that activates autophagy. And so the Pac-Man comes out, and I can take care of and digest and recirculate and get rid of all these damaged proteins and membranes in my cell. Well, we get up in the morning and we break the fast by eating. Imagine if you didn't eat carbohydrates in the morning, a morning. So for example, if I had my last meal at 7 o'clock in the evening and I didn't eat a midnight snack, I didn't have a late night snack, I was not putting any glucose into my bloodstream. It's now 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning, 9 in the morning, and instead of eating carbohydrates, cereals or whatever, I had an avocado or I had an egg, I had protein, I had some fat. So I can go from 12 hours to 14 to 16 to 18. And maybe at lunchtime, I finally break down. I go, I'm going to have some carbohydrates now. I'll have a sandwich or something. So the more time I'm in this ketosis state, whether I'm doing it by pure fasting, 100% fasting, or I switch to a keto type diet where I'm eating protein and fats and no carbohydrates, I can extend this range of time in which this mild nutritional stress is activating these cell protective processes going on. So that's a ketosis principle and an autophagy principle, but it's all founded on this idea of hormesis. And it has to be intermittent. This isn't a diet that you're going to do 24/7, 365. You don't always eat just no carbs. You're going in and out of it. You cycle in and out of it. And so it's the intermittentness of it, of this lifestyle, that creates this stress response, this adaptive response to the stress in our environment that allows us to be healthy. And that is the essence of the redox lifestyle. That's the essence, in my view, of what Asea is, as a mild oxidative stimulus. Because of the agents in Asea, it provokes a mild response such that I activate all of these pathways and I have health restored. So I hope that wasn't too deep. But that's the premise in Healthy Matters. The whole Redox lifestyle is based on that, the grounding foundational concept of hormesis. And I know for a long time, even our company was a little reticent about kind of marching that out there because it was really hard to know how to message it. How do you explain it? In a minute, we can get back to the other part of nutrition, and because you asked the question about the metabolic flexibility, the ability or the efficiency with which we can flex one way and then the other is important. And you made a comment about, this constant fueling. There's some companies that talk about, or some ideologies that say you should never go hungry. You should always, have frequent meals, because what you don't want is to go hungry and then go crazy. And it's like, that is 180 degrees off from the way our cells were designed. The fact that I am carb addicted, that my hormones, we talk about on the back of the bottle, right? We have a thing that talks about hormone regulation. And a lot of people think that that's like dopamine and serotonin and, some of those and it is. But think of the hormones that are related to this energy metabolism side of nutrition. Think about ghrelin and leptin. Think about insulin. Think about glucagon, for those of you who know those words. Those are all the hormones that are associated with energy metabolism. And when I fast, it's like when people have a hard time fasting, it's because they're not fat adapted. They're carb addicted. They're not conditioned to be able to flex back and forth. And if you can fast easily, I'm not saying that you don't feel hunger, you're just not, as you said, hangry, about it. And so the fact that you can flex and go back and forth, and that you can manage that with fats and proteins, and just by modifying your diet so that you can extend the amount of time, even to days if you want to, you can like fast without fasting in that regard, because I'm treating the energy metabolism in a manner such that it is favoring the pathway genes that are cell protective.
I haven't gotten very deep into the book, but it speaks my language, because I am one of those people who I stay in nutritional ketosis. Actually, I've been in pretty high ketosis, and doing the things that you're talking about. The word hormesis is a new one for me, even as a physician. I'd not heard that before, but I am very familiar with stressing the body for health. And so, when I started, when I wanted to get into ketosis, because for some people it's tough to kind of do that if you're not flexible, or you haven't been on a ketosis diet or ketogenic diet. And so I do it by fasting. I'll do a block fast, a water fast for 5 days, so that I'm driving my blood sugars down and bringing those ketones up in my blood so that my body is forced to use them. It's very interesting. But, when we're talking about this, one of the things that really got my attention early on is the metabolomics studies that were done by Dr. David Neiman, that showed that people just taking this product were able to access free fatty acids in their blood as a fuel source, almost as though they were in ketosis. And it was glycogen sparing, glycogen being the most readily available sugar that we get out of the liver, out of muscles and all, that we use when we first start exercising. So it's interesting, this idea of hormesis, that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You actually say that in the book. And I love that, because, one of the most important, and you alluded to it, in my opinion, one of the most important hormones is insulin. And, when you were talking about people who snack or graze and eat every 2 hours, there's a lot of people who say you should eat every 2 hours to feed yourself. You're causing an insulin spike every time you do that, every time you eat. And it doesn't even matter. You spike your insulin even when you're eating fat and protein, not just with carbohydrates. It's just more so. And so
you have to wonder there, just to interrupt and then go on, but you have to wonder there if back to the rule of, if glucose is on board, that's what gets burned first. Right. And so if I'm eating fats and proteins and glucose at high levels, or high enough levels that that's the predominant fuel source for most organs, then where does the fat and the protein wind up going as you digest it?
to your hips. Quite possibly. But you know what, and that's key. You have to be burning it, right? And there are some people like Anne who is out there running every morning, so she's burning it up. She can eat a little glucose and it's probably gone and doesn't land anywhere. But you know, for a lot of us who overconsume carbohydrates or glucose, that's what ends up on our hips. It's not fat that makes you fat, honestly. It's, you know, it's the sugars that make you fat. And, you know, it's really interesting. You know, we could have a whole long conversation. I love manipulating my metabolism. You know, I have one of those little glucose monitors, does glucose and ketones. And I love seeing like how long I can go. And autophagy that you speak about is such a huge thing right now. And, you know, if you're a faster, you get into really high levels of autophagy about day 4 of a water fast. You know, so fasting is really, listen, you guys, don't do it without physician supervision or without talking to somebody. You don't want to just starve yourself, but there are really good health benefits to fasting and to forcing some of these things that Dr. Lee is talking about into happening. So
and that's an important point that you make, because we're dealing with energy metabolism. Then people who have blood sugar disorders have to be very careful about how they approach this, because the nutrition, the energy metabolism, energy substrate side of this whole conversation of nutrition can be life-threatening for some people if they don't handle it right. And so there is some wisdom in that regard. If you're going to get serious and go off into some of the, you know, the deeper aspects of this, you at least want your physician to be aware of it, because there may be modifications that you, for example, if you're taking insulin or you're using medications to help you support, you know, blood sugar metabolism, because you have metabolic disease. That's the whole definition here of insulin resistance. If you're going to play in that arena, which is really, in my view, the right thing you should be doing anyway, because that's a better lifestyle, you just need to be really careful, as Dr. Hayes mentioned, that this isn't something you want to be kind of the cowboy in the Wild West, you know, on your own, and all of a sudden you find that that you're crashing and you can't support yourself. And it takes time. You know, you need to become conditioned, and that's the whole principle of hormesis, is that you're conditioning your cells to be responsive. The reason you have metabolic disorder, metabolic disease, is because your liver cells aren't handling this properly. And you made the comment about ketones. We talked about, you know, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. There's a fourth energy source. Those three are all exogenous. They're from outside the body. The fourth energy source are the ketones. There's some other minor ones that enter Krebs cycle from other processes, such as when triglycerides come apart, the glycerol molecule that holds them together, that can be, you know, combusted. But ketones are a very pure, very clean energy source, and the brain loves it. I mean, again, go back to the hormone comment. It's like when you lower your glucose levels, I mean, the brain's up here saying, I need help. I don't really do well with amino acids and fatty acids. I need glucose. And if you're going to starve me of glucose, I'm going to be sending you some signals that you need to be eating, because I'm not a happy camper up here. Well, as we become conditioned and we start making our own ketones, which is the fourth energy source, we make it endogenously. The brain loves it. These ketone molecules are great. And again, the disclaimer there is, if you're a diabetic, this is an arena that you want to be very careful about. And it's actually one of the reasons that it took so long, so many decades, for this whole concept of keto to come in vogue again, is because in the early days, nobody understood it well, and the diabetics were developing diabetic ketoacidosis. And that is a medical life-threatening situation where a diabetic cell is saying, I can't see any blood sugar. I can't get glucose inside the cell. I'm insulin resistant, so I can't feed the glucose. And so therefore it shifts into fatty acids, metabolism, creating ketones. And now I have ketones and glucose in the bloodstream, and my blood and the energy amount goes way up high. And that's an acidic environment. That's the acidosis part. And you're in the hospital in a pretty grave situation if that's not controlled. But that gave this kind of a bad a black eye in the early days before they understood about this. And now that we understand it better, we can now, as Dr. Marine says, we can now manipulate this. We can hack it, not because we have a hack, which I'll come back to in a moment, but because we can manipulate our lifestyle to regulate the energy, the amount of energy that we're consuming that we've got to do something with. We either have to burn it or we have to store it. And the problem is that we're not going without very much. I mean, the longest we really have to go to get food nowadays is about 20 to 25 feet to the refrigerator. You know, we're not going days and weeks or seasons, you know, where we're grubbing for berries anymore. And so we're in a constantly fed state, and our hormones reflect that. And so that's where that wisdom comes from. I want to say something about Dr. Neiman's metabolomic study, because that was pivotal, and everybody has access to that. You can see the videos. You can see. You can go to amazingmolecules.com. On the second page, go to more videos, and there's a second page there. There's two reports there. One was him speaking at a convention, and the other is just in his own performance laboratory at Appalachia State in North Carolina. But they did a nice 10-so-minute video summarizing the metabolomic shift that happens in the mitochondria as it relates to these energy sources, these substrates, these Krebs intermediates, and so forth. And the conclusion of that, kind of spoiler alert, but the conclusion of that was that the shift to fat burning occurred before exercise began, which isn't something that happens in normal life. That's a huge clue. That is metabolic flexibility. It's an induced metabolic flexibility. If everything in that study is true and holds, that's groundbreaking, and it has been groundbreaking because that describes why a mild oxidative stimulus, such as we have in our big blue bottle, can have this effect on our mitochondria with regard to how the mitochondria views its energy sources. That's a huge thing.
Okay, now I'm the odd person here because you guys are speaking way up here. I'm down here. Can you speak to my level and explain to people that are first off brand new, that really have no idea even what the blue bottle is, Lee? But I'm thinking of the movie, The Chronicles of Narnia, that I've just walked into the closet and there's a door, and I've opened the door, and there's this huge new world that you have opened up, and Asea has opened up. So we're walking into this whole new paradigm shift, and you're answering a lot of things that are, again, above my head. I get the gist of what you're saying, but Lee, you're giving us hope that we can finally start to understand that by what we put into our body, now we can begin to understand how our body uses that. But can you keep it really simple to me, to all the other people out there that aren't doctors and aren't nutritionalists? Can you boil it down to something that I can understand?
Sure.
Okay.
I think it, again, starts with the premise. This is how I always like to context this. It starts with the premise of, you know, we are a body of cells put together, but we live in a world of toxic stress. Everybody knows that there's toxicity and air pollution and radiation and impure foods and pesticides and herbicides, and we have sleep issues where we may not be breathing, so we're hypoxic or low oxygen, whatever. All of that, plus just the facts of aging as we get older, all of that has an impact on our cells and how they function. And if we start with the premise that any disease, any disorder, we can nuance that, maybe not any disorder, but most all the chronic health disorders are a consequence of cells not working right in the first place, upstream. They didn't work right, so the downstream result is some disorder or disease. So if we start with that, then the question is, well, we know we have an immune system, and we know that it's supposed to be responsive when things happen. It will do things to restore and put us back in place. Okay, that's common knowledge and ground. But the question is, how does it do that? How does it know when it's under stress? And what is the mechanism that the cells say, whoops, that's a problem. I have stress right now. What am I going to do about it? We're out here, we don't know all that. I'm referring to you perhaps, like, I don't understand all those. I'm just going to top load. Right. I'm going to eat vitamins. I hope they do their job, and maybe I take too many, maybe I take too little, but I don't understand the things. So the question is, well, and we also recognize that lifestyle, which we'll define as eating right, exercise, good sleep, stress reduction, keep your bowel healthy and your gum disease under control. We understand that all of that will make or keep me healthier. We can all agree on that, right? The question is, how does it do it? What's the mechanism that exercise or good nutrition or good sleep or stress reduction has? What's the mechanism that keeps me well? And this is the heart and soul, I think, of the redox, well, what I call the regulatory circuit. There has to be a sensor, there has to be a thermostat, if you will, that detects when the temperature is too high or too low, or when there's a problem, and so forth. And then there has to be something that clicks that says, whoa, there's a problem there, there's stress, and all that stress gets translated into oxidation. That's back to this conversation of these molecules. When there's too many of those oxidants or these free radicals, too many of these reactive molecules, I'm going to have some problems because they cause damage. But they also are part of the signaling or the communication network that tells my cell, tells my DNA what to do in response to all of these things we just talked about. Because if I didn't respond to them, I would die. I'm going to get sick. I have to be able to respond to the stress in some way that makes me equal to the challenge. I have to adapt or be stress responsive or response able. Otherwise, I'm going to die. So in the simplistic terms I can think of, the whole concept of redox is that it is a mechanism, or it is a modus operandi. This is the MO of how the cell knows when it's in trouble, and how it gives the instructions or the communication to tell my DNA what to do in response to it. It's all, as Maureen obviously says, it's not magic, it's just physiology. And that's exactly what this is. I'm responding to changes in pH, changes in oxidation, changes to hydration, changes to nutritional status. Whatever's going wrong or right, there is a signaling mechanism, and that's where these redox molecules come in. Asea's corner in this market is that they have just simply figured out how to create those same signaling molecules in a laboratory. We can go into an electrolysis chamber and take salt water, which is exactly what I have in my body. You go to the hospital, they put an IV in, it's normal saline. So you couldn't put regular water in your veins because you would die. This is not the right osmotic, things going on. So the mitochondria and the cells are dealing with this salt water chemistry. People who make light of, well, that's just salt water. It's like, you don't understand your biochemistry at all. This isn't just salt water, it's saline, and it's physiological saline. And when I electrolyze the saline, I can split it apart and create these fractionated atoms that are these are the redox reactive molecules that do the signaling, that are the byproducts of burning glucose and fats and proteins in my mitochondria inside Krebs cycle. That's the smoke that comes off of this reaction of burning my fuel to create energy. Nature's very efficient, and it uses that smoke, if you will, the byproducts, these reactive molecules, to be the communication method that signals my body when to respond and how to respond to these stresses that I have. And if I can't respond, if I can't detect, and if I can't mechanistically respond in that way, then there's going to be a problem. We call it dysfunction, mitochondrial dysfunction, and so forth. I'm going to wind up down the road with cells going rogue, I'm going to wind up with metabolic disease where I can't burn my energy. I can't process it. I'm not very flexible. I'm starting to store weight where I don't want it to be stored, all because I'm not metabolically healthy. Redox is the foundation of that whole conversation. If it weren't for that, none of this would work. And we would be totally dependent on medical intervention to try and make the symptom go away, because now we've got disease.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to boil it down to real simple. When I was 58 years old, I did not have any hope. I was addicted to pain pills. I had a lot of back discomfort from my back surgeries. Lee, your story with your wife. Maureen, your stories. But my best friend came over here and gave me hope. And at the end of the day, that is what we're educating people on, is no matter where you are in your life, if you follow these basic principles of what Lee Ostler is teaching us, Lee, is there hope for everybody?
Well, there is. And again, it's lifestyle. And my whole point is this, is lifestyle is a choice. I get that there are some genetic factors involved in all of our lives if we look at our history, family history and so forth. But nobody is forcing that ice cream into your mouth. Nobody's forcing you to stay on the couch and not get up and walk around.
What was that, Maureen?
Is it too personal?
You're hitting close to home?
Oh, it's Ben and Jerry are.
Oh,
And the controversial part of this is that everybody has their favorite ideology, their favorite belief. And most of it is born of ignorance. And I'm going to say that all of the diets out there that you could select, all of them, almost all of them, have really good aspects to them. If you understood the rules of the cell, you could go out and you take a little bit from the Mediterranean, a little bit from the keto, a little bit from South Beach, a little bit from the the Word of Wisdom or Seventh-day Adventist approach. I mean, you could kind of bring all the great parts and put them together, and what would you have? You'd have the Redox diet. And it isn't in a package. You don't go get this. You have to put it together yourself, and it's that lifestyle. So in that regard, you're at choice. And I think that.
Let me ask you a question, because for people who are listening into this that maybe don't understand about redox or replenishing the redox molecules, why do you need both? I mean, we know that the more good things that you do for your body, the bigger bang you're going to get for your buck as far as your redox molecules. And, I always joke that if you're sitting on a couch with a Big Mac in one hand and a clicker in the other, you need these molecules just to keep you alive. But, if you're sitting here listening to this and you're talking about the redox life, could people just make those healthy choices with a good diet, good exercise, and good sleep? What else are they getting from replenishing their redox molecules on top of that?
Well, it's a good point you make. And we have to concede the point that good lifestyle, good exercise, good nutrition is an essential part of being healthy. And yes, I mean, sometimes we get a little defensive because we think that we own the entire redox landscape, and we don't. We simply have some really great solutions that live on this very big redox landscape. One of the things that we're going to discover in 2 weeks when the company rolls out some new products is that the phytochemical side of nutrition is an important part of the redox landscape, because phytochemicals have the ability to stimulate some of the stress that we've been talking about. They are not redox signaling molecules, but they have some element of ability to interact with the redox sensitive transcription factors that we also play with Asea. And because of that, taking vitamins, taking herbs, so forth, has the ability to support that. So you get the nutrition side and the redox signaling side, and they come together. They're very synergistic. They're extremely synergistic. And so, but most of us live in a world where the stresses that we are experiencing tend to be more on the high side. We're experiencing high amounts of stress, either because we're abusing our bodies with, the bad parts of the lifestyle that we're not doing well. And the point is, why is it our common experience that when people begin taking Asea Redox, that within time, they begin to see changes that they never experienced, even when they were on good diets? There's an important point there. And the answer to that also involves the principle of hormesis, because everybody has a different sweet spot. Everybody has a different hormetic point or zone. The principle is still true, but it might be shifted up or down that stress axis. And so they're going to respond differently, or it will take more, or it will take longer, because everybody has a different hormetic response. But everybody has a hormetic response. And so it's all of it blended together synergistically makes it work better.
Yeah, I'll state the disclaimer: we don't treat, diagnose, or cure anything. Our bodies just has the ability to heal itself when we supplement more of what we're lacking. So I'm looking at the picture of Jim on our shelf, and he's probably never showed it, but he was at a time 300 pounds. So, he had, the back discomfort, and he had things that he had to take for many years, even before I met him. And the signaling took place, and within 3 days, he's off of something he was on for 25 years. So diet, exercise wasn't really working in the picture prior to that. Redox signaling is what impacted Jim, and that's what made it so miraculous, is we were able to see that. Because if we really settled for good nutrition and an occasional workout back then, when he was limited, nothing was happening. But on the third day, he's already seeing changes where he didn't have to rely on that anymore. And then you think about the side effects of what that was doing for 25 years on his organs. And then the brain fog, he was able to have clarity by that third day. I mean, that's, to me, that's huge. And this is why people need to, check it out, to try it at minimum 90 days. Yeah. Your issue may take more than that, but at least try it and see these cells regenerate.
Our bodies are amazing. You got your wife back. How long did it take for you to get your wife back before you saw a major shift in her health, Lee?
Well,
that's what started this whole thing.
The thing that started this was that within at least 48 hours. She has major issues, and she's still not, she won't ever be done with them. But we'd tried for 30 plus years. And with just minor changes and just continually getting worse. And when something comes along and shifts things that quickly, it gets your attention.
And can I say something real quick? Because what breaks my heart, and I can't help but look at Maureen, and it breaks my heart when people don't take it seriously, and then something happens to a loved one. Maureen, with your mom. And there's a lot of people that have, a lot of regret, because it's a dietary supplement made from salt water in Salt Lake City, and it's got no nutritional value, and they blow it off. But Maureen, anything to say about that?
Yeah, it's as a medical doctor, a Western trained MD, we have a tendency to be a little skeptical and cynical about things, especially if they come to us in a manner that we're not used to or that we don't trust. And there's a lot of, I like to call it my period of arrogance and ignorance, because when my mom was extremely ill, somebody reached out to me and said, you need to know about this product for your mom. And it's just, it galls me now when I think about it, because I was just like, please I'm a physician, like, all knowing, right? Like the Oz or whatever. And of course, I didn't look at it. I deleted all the emails and didn't look at the stuff, especially when I found out it was salt water from Salt Lake City. I live on an island, you guys. We're surrounded by salt water. So, my mom, she perished 2 months later. And Asea came back into our life because of my husband's life-threatening illness. Gosh, about 6 months out, not even, about 5 months after that. And honestly, came from a person that I knew well, and I trusted him. I trusted his judgment, but I was like, you've got to be kidding, not this saltwater stuff again. And, I had to do a deep dive, kind of like Dr. Lee did. I didn't write a book. I probably should have, but yeah, and it's funny because everybody has their own journey, right? And I let my mom's experience, or the fact that I wish I had tried it on my mom, kind of drive me to get the information to other people. And, that's just our job, right? We're the messenger. We can't make anybody eat from the plate. We're just there to pass the cookies. But, and we didn't have a real fast response at our house. A couple of people that I offhandedly mentioned it to did, but our blessing was about 6 weeks in. But, you guys know the story of my husband. He was basically a respiratory cripple. And this is a man who was a previous marathon runner. And so it was devastating to us. It was a huge change in the quality of his life. And, we were worried about our futures. And Asea gave us our lives back, gave him his health back, gave us our life back, and it's done so much more.
That's great.
And when that's why we do this, guys. We're coming to the top of the hour, and we continually do this because we have to. That's kind of the way we see it. A lot of times we talk about the same things, but it's the repetition that I believe that works. But Dr. Ostler, you have given the world a phenomenal gift. It's just now it's up to them to be able to do a little bit deeper dive. But I just can't thank you enough for going to, people go to redoxmatters.com and you can order the book there. Dr. Ostler will be at the convention. He will have a table. If you have purchased books, you can get autographs there. You can buy books there. We are still contemplating. I believe we're going to do our show from where we were just talking pre-show, that we may have some events that we may be butting up against, but I believe we may have a reduced show, but we want people to get an experience. But at the end of the day, guys, we're talking about your health, yours. You got but one body. And how do you respect it? How do you respect yourself? But Lee, you've given us hope back, that no matter what your condition, that by the basis of Redox and then doing the nutrition and everything else that you're teaching us on, the greatest gift is to give people hope. And so I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Is there anything you want to wrap up with, Dr. Lee?
No, I appreciate your comments and your thoughts there. Very kindly and warmly received. I appreciate that. I talk about in the book and at other times, I talk about these principles as being natural law. These are natural law, and understanding these natural laws removes so much of the confusion that's out there. I get so many, because I subscribe to a lot of things because I like to see what other people's are saying about their thing, I like to read their advertising copy and what the claims that they're making about their diets and their nutrition and so forth. And by becoming aware of these rules of the cell, by these natural laws, it's so refreshing to be able to sort through all the nonsense that's out there, the nonsense and the half truths. And one of the things I talk about in the first section of the book is the deconstruction of the Redox diet, the deconstruction of the Redox lifestyle. That's the definition of Western disease. Western diet is, we used to live this way. We didn't have Asea, we didn't have what we call a biohack necessarily, but we lived this lifestyle in past eras. We ate food that was raised in very rich soil that was nearby, that didn't have to be transported or processed or refrigerated. We ate grains and seeds and foods that had weathered. They had already had what we call the anti-nutrients removed from them. The phytates were essentially removed. That's not what happens today. You know, our food is harvested and we eat it, especially the refined stuff. We eat it, and we're getting major doses of these phytochemicals or these anti-nutrients that provoke stress. And in the old days, they didn't do that. The grain weathered in the field in sheaves before they milled it. But we don't do that today. And so these dietary problems that we have with our food today, it's no wonder that we have so many of the sensitivities and the GI digestive problems and so on and so forth that we have. So understanding these laws, understanding this is how the cell works, makes it so that you can make intelligent and wise choices in the grocery store, in the restaurants, in how you snack, in how you exercise. It just changes everything. It's a paradigm shift to approach health this way and not to be locked into a diet.
Exactly.
So thank you.
Hooray.
Well, thank you. So guys, Maureen, anything?
No, I'm just going to say it's like it gives you the steps to good health. You know, you can follow
Yes.
the book and learn what you need to do to get your body back on the right track, and using redox biochemistry to do it. So
Yeah.
fantastic. Thank you, Lee,
Yes.
for this book. Wonderful.
Yeah.
I love it.
And from a
I've gotten
business
through it
perspective,
by the end, but yeah.
well, the second one to me is an easier read than the first. I can tell you that. Redox Matters was a little bit harder. The Healthy Matters was easier to get it in real quick. But I was just saying really quick that from a business standpoint, people watching, I know there's even some sciencey types watching tonight, but I mean, really the sky's the limit. I mean, if you just start sharing it with people, you can just start seeing your business grow. You just have to plant a seed and pique an interest and send them to the Healthy Matters, send them to redoxmatters.com. So they'll learn. So
So
Thank you.
again, we do this to help share this throughout the whole world. We're in 33 countries. We have a one-of-a-kind technology. We have hearts. And when you go to convention, you'll see the hearts of the executive staff, the hearts of the people. But we do this to invite other people to come learn. Now, we will not be here next Friday. It is Good Friday in the States. And then the next Friday will be
Vegas.
So we will be there. And then we have Dr. Carmen Keith will be with us the following Friday after convention. Then Ann's got someone lined up, a doctor from Spain.
Spain. And she's Romanian. We're going to talk skin. That's how she decided to get on Redox. We're excited. She's younger. So we got some new.
Not that we're old.
No. 57 young. But she's 2 years on the product, and the young blood will be awesome for that night. So
guys, thank you. So again, we will not be here next Friday. We will see you at convention. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Love y'all. We do this for you. We do this to help pass the great word of Redox. Thank y'all. God bless.
Have a
Bye,
great
everybody.
Sunday
Love you
weekend.
guys.
Bye,
See you in
y'all.
Las
Thank
Vegas.
you.